Hey guys, Xavier here, editing the video. Just wanted to let you know that my ISO was all fucked up during the first half of this review, which is why the first half of the review, lighting-wise, looks much darker than it usually is. I've tried everything I can to do to color correct it, but no matter what I do, it just ends up looking even worse. So yeah, just throwing that out there. Enjoy the video.
Just a little preface before we get started, everybody. It is very windy outside my dorm room window tonight, and I'm also on the 14th floor of my building on campus, so if you hear any roaring, screeching, deafening wind in the background, that is what you're hearing. What is going on, guys? Welcome back to the channel, and welcome to episode 10 of the 2023 Halloween special. If you haven't yet watched the previous 9 episodes, I've linked them right up above. Please go and check them out. It's been an amazing time filming all of those videos. And tonight we're going to be talking about another smash hit horror film from the year 2022, that being Ti West's X. The film stars Mia Goth, Jenna Ortega, Brittany Snow, Kid Cudi, amongst others, and it tells the story of a group of young filmmakers who rent out a cabin from an elderly couple in the backwoods of 1979 Texas to make an adult film. But when they're caught in the act by their elderly hosts, it becomes a horrifying, gruesome fight for survival. This film is a perfect throwback to the classic slashers and horror films of the 70s and 80s that film buffs, and particularly horror buffs such as myself, absolutely adore. So many aspects of this film, such as it being shot on film and also implementing many filmmaking techniques of the 70s and 80s, really hit home that homage. But the film does a very good job at establishing that it is not ripping anything off. It is simply a very well done throwback. This film is superbly directed, and Ti West obviously is a darling in the indie horror scene. But in my opinion, I think this is definitely his best work. He really comes into his own as a director here, and his vision is so clear, but it never feels forced, and that is hard to do, especially as a horror filmmaker, when you make a horror film that is also trying to have very powerful messages. Everything about this movie on a technical level, in my opinion, is absolutely masterful. From the sound design to the cinematography, it is all superbly done. As I said, they implement a lot of old school filmmaking techniques from the 70s and 80s, and namely techniques used in horror films of that era to really heighten the tension. This film also features great characters played by insanely talented actors giving it their all. The performances and the writing of the characters in this movie is genuinely incredible, which isn't something you can really say for a lot of classic slashers from the 70s and 80s. John Carpenter's Halloween, for example, the original from 1978, which I have reviewed on this channel, is a great movie, and it is absolutely a classic, but that is in spite of how terrible some of its characters are written and portrayed. This film, on the other hand, is a throwback to those kinds of slashers, but it also boasts amazingly well-written characters portrayed by actors who are giving Oscar-worthy performances. This film being an A24 horror film, it definitely has more on its mind than just blood, gore, and nudity. This film explores incredibly deep and existential themes regarding sexuality, spirituality, and age. And while obviously this is a horror film and therefore explores the horror of those themes and makes them very scary, it really is overall more so just really fucking sad, which is a massive positive with this movie. This actually has a very intact emotional core. The themes and messages present within this movie are woven so seamlessly in with the narrative. It's honestly very impressive, because that's also another thing that is insanely hard to do. And it's the kind of shit that really gets to me. I'm a very existential person. I'm always thinking about insanely deep and existential things. I'm always down to have a deep conversation 24/7. Hit me up, please. I really am always down to have a very deep conversation. So those aspects of the film really spoke to me, especially because of how well done they are. This movie is also very well paced. There is no excess fat on this movie whatsoever. Every single scene matters, whether it be to progress the character development or the plot development. Every single scene in this movie has a purpose and is positioned perfectly within the edit. It also does a fantastic job at the buildup of suspense throughout the film, because if you're familiar with Ti West's work, he is definitely known for crafting slow burns, and I think that this is genuinely his magnum opus. This is a slow burn done so right that I think it should be looked at as the blueprint for how to do a slow burn for any film moving forward. And it just builds it up so well. You really don't get to the main hook of this movie until about 2/3 of the way in. And a lot of movies would not be able to make that work, but this film definitely does.
Alright everybody, back to shady MacBook Pro audio. The lighting is now going to correct itself.
And when that moment hits, when it is finally time for this movie to go into full thriller horror mode, the suspense is perfectly done. I also genuinely believe that this is one of the best edited horror films that I've honestly ever seen. It is a masterful edit that is not just focused on making sure everything is organized in a way that feels like a really well fleshed out chronological order of events. They work certain things in with the editing of this film to enhance the story and enhance the effectiveness and the emotion of it. It's genuinely incredible. Rewatching it tonight, it really took my breath away all over again. I also love how there's parallels between the film that they're making in this movie and then this movie itself when it comes to themes and certain lines of dialogue that connect to other events that are happening at the same time that they're filming the movie. Really well done writing there, and again, props to the editing for weaving it together so well. There is also a scene in this film that is essentially the thesis of the entire movie, and it doesn't feel forced or on the nose or like it's being shoved down your throat at all. It's a very well written scene of all of these characters sitting around just having a conversation, bonding, but also having a debate, and it's essentially a scene that states every theme and message that the movie is going for, and it is so well done. It is so good that I'm prepared to say it's one of my favorite scenes of all time. It's so endearing to these characters, and it's also so perfectly placed within the narrative of the movie. It happens at just about the halfway point. In fact, almost exactly at the halfway point, which is really, really noticeably clever in context. And as I said, when the shit hits the fan in this movie, it hits. When this movie finally takes its turn from slow burn into full-fledged, violent, bloody horror slasher, it is such a good payoff. Oh my god, because you're just waiting for it throughout the entire movie. It's building it up, and it's building up that anticipation that when it finally releases, it is so satisfying. I also find the motivation behind the killers in this movie to be genuinely terrifying. Horror that explores more existential concepts like this when it comes to age and mortality and things like that, that's the horror that tends to get under my skin the most, and this movie does it incredibly well. It's not your traditional kind of horror, at least when it comes to the motivation and the reason the killers in this movie are doing what they're doing, but they just make it work so well. It's this kind of stuff that genuinely scares me and is looming over us as people in everyday life, whether we always notice it or not. Also, the finale and especially the ending of this movie is pitch perfect. I absolutely adore it. It is the exact type of finale that I was hoping for when I watched this movie for the first time, and I cannot tell you how happy I was when it's the finale that I got. It's just such a good payoff, and it's so cathartic, especially given everything else that the film was building to. But really, the biggest takeaway from this movie is the impact of those themes, and it also has a very sex-positive message, which I love. Historically, horror films have always seemed to punish characters who are very open and expressive and liberated when it comes to their sexuality. They're very open about it, they're fine talking about it, they're fine exploring it, but the authoritative voice of this movie is not punishing these characters for being that way. It's one of the most sex-positive horror movies I've ever seen, and that's just something that is incredibly rare in the genre, and something that I very much appreciate. But really, those themes of aging and when you get older, you're not as desirable, you know, you can't really enjoy any of the pleasures of life anymore as a young person, those really hit home in this movie. They do it so well. There are devastating scenes in this movie, and I'm not talking about kills, I'm talking about just scenes that are specifically meant to hit home those themes. So well done, so tragic, and it really weighs on your heart long after seeing the film. But at the same time, this movie is kind of a jack of all trades. You can go into this movie wanting a very elevated existential horror film that is very thrilling and suspenseful and well made, but also has a lot to say thematically and emotionally. Or if you just want to go into this movie and see a bloody slasher with nudity and gore and amazing performances and a tight pace, you'll you will get that as well. It truly is a jack of all trades in that way. And that's another thing I want to say too. This movie is very self-referential, but not in a Scream way. It does it very much more subtly, in my opinion, and very, very well. In my opinion, it just makes the movie that much better. Because yes, this movie does have some very explicit content, but it never felt gratuitous or over the top. It was always either played for comedy or played to directly serve the narrative and the character arcs. I feel like a lot of films are scared to explore subject matter like this because it's seen as taboo, and perhaps it is, but we have filmmakers like Ty West to thank for not being afraid to explore these themes, because look at the success of this movie. People like it when filmmakers take risks, particularly people within the film community especially. So yeah guys, I honestly think X is a modern classic and many people feel the same, but I also feel that in time, like in decades to come, it will be seen as an all-time classic horror film, period. So without further ado, let's go ahead and rate X. It's one of my favorite horror films of 2022, and I'm going to give it a 10 out of 10. Guys, thank you for tuning back into the 2023 Halloween special. Look forward to episode 10 of that special coming to you very, very soon. Thank you so much as always for watching. I will see you in the next video, and until then, keep writing, keep shooting, and keep editing.